Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo!
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. Today we are talking all about if you should or should not go gluten-free. Before we talk about it, we're going to define what gluten-free is, who it's for, who it's not for, and then instructions on kind of how and which way I think the best way to go about that would be. So first things first, what is gluten? Maybe you've heard about it in the media, maybe you read about it, maybe you've heard it causes inflammation and that you need to avoid it, or maybe you heard it helps you to lose weight when you go gluten-free. All of that is not true unless you have certain ailments or medical conditions. So today we're going to talk about that. So gluten is a protein component in wheat. So anything that is made from wheat, so things like pasta, bread, even certain grains like farro will have gluten in it. It's the protein component in the gluten. And it actually is what makes those foods have elasticity and great texture and flavor. So when you take it out, those fluffy breads that you get are really dense and like taste like cardboard. So gluten is actually a really great thing for texture and flavor. However, certain populations do experience that inflammation and they're even allergic or highly sensitive to it. So if you have celiac disease, you have a gluten allergy, meaning no amount in gluten is actually going to be beneficial for you. It's going to make you feel like absolute crap. And it's only going to make your celiacs have flare-ups. And it's just really, really not good for your gut health. Now, if you do not have celiac disease and you suspect you might have a gluten sensitivity or intolerance, then you would probably be having lots of bloating, lots of like gastrointestinal upset. So maybe just like irregular bowel movements. Maybe you have potential skin conditions. Gluten can cause that as well. It's not clear 100%. So if you have you're like maybe acne prone and you go gluten-free and your skin starts to feel better, that could potentially be that your gut is healing and that's why your skin's getting better. So it's a little bit complicated. So all that to say, if you heard that going gluten-free is going to help you lose weight, that's not true. So I just want to make that clear. Also, if you don't have a sensitivity, if you don't have an intolerance, if you don't have an allergy, then eliminating gluten is literally not necessary. And those who might be struggling something like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, which is basically a blanket statement of we're not really sure what's wrong with you, so let's put a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. You might potentially see benefits from going gluten-free, and if you are like kind of bloated all the time and you go gluten-free and you're not as bloated, then yes, you could potentially lose weight, but more importantly, it's going to be used to treat kind of those symptoms that you're experiencing from the IBS. So all that to say, it's really not necessary. So if you really love those foods and you don't want to give them up, those gluten-containing foods, you literally don't need to. Also to say that those foods that are marketed as gluten-free, they're great for those who have celiacs that need to know that something is gluten-free so it's easy to find. But just because it says gluten-free, it doesn't make something healthier. If anything, because they're taking the gluten out and they still want the food to taste good and to last long on the shelves, they often will compensate by adding like preservatives or fats or other things just to kind of make it taste good and stay. So that's not to say that, like with any processed foods, some of it, of course, you can incorporate in the diet and we don't want to stress about that. But if you're having, say, a gluten-free cookie because you think it's healthier than a regular cookie, you're wrong, okay? It's a cookie regardless. And so it's something that we can learn how to eat and enjoy, but it's not something we want to be over-consuming on a regular basis, right? So if you are someone who has a gluten sensitivity or intolerance, then I suggest choosing foods that are naturally gluten-free. So in the morning, maybe you normally would have a cereal that's made with wheat. Instead, have a cereal that's made with a gluten-free grain. Oatmeal is considered gluten-free for those who are sensitive. For those who have celiac, it's a little bit complicated. But for example, something like, Total cereal, it's made from wheat. It's going to be high in fiber. It's actually a great cereal. But because it's made from wheat, if you have a gluten sensitivity, I would recommend something like Cheerios, which is made from oats, which is naturally gluten-free, and it'll be higher in fiber. So all that to say, also choosing your grains, choosing starchy veggies is always a great starch to have instead of like maybe your pasta. There's great pasta alternatives like chickpea pasta and lentil-based pasta. And honestly, whether you're gluten-free or not, I feel like those are great swaps to your traditional pasta sometimes, if that's something that you're kind of okay with and flexible with, because it's going to be higher in protein. It's going to have more of that filling power. Not to say that you can't have regular pasta when you want it if there's no allergy or sensitivity. But that's just something that I often teach. Now, I wanted to also go over what did I want to go over? So we talked about natural gluten-free foods. We talked about if your allergy. Oh, I wanted to talk about like if you think you have a gluten sensitivity. This is what I want you to do. Rather than trying to figure it out on your own, you need to go to your primary care physician, see if they can get you a referral to a gastroenterologist. A gastroenterologist is a stomach doctor. That's their expertise, and they're helpful in the diagnosis. So unfortunately, the testing for all this stuff is probably going to be like really unpleasant things: endoscopies, colonoscopies, allergy testing, all of those things. Now, well, I will say, don't do those blood tests that tell you that you're allergic to everything X, Y, and Z. Those are not accurate. But certain things, like if you're lactose intolerant, so maybe you've been having a lot of bloating and you think it's gluten, but it's really lactose, like that's going to be super helpful. With that said, whether you see a gastroenterologist or not, you need to work with a registered dietitian. Working with a registered dietitian is going to be super helpful. So for example, in our program, people are enrolled for a minimum of 6 months. They'll be placed with a dietitian on my team. And in that 6-month period, we are basically just experimenting and assessing and looking at what you currently eat in a day. Well, how does that food make you feel? And slowly each week picking apart the things that make you feel your absolute best and those things that, you know what, maybe they didn't feel so great. So maybe you think you have a gluten sensitivity and you're getting rid of gluten and you're stressing yourself out about these gluten containing foods. But really we find actually that it's not, you're totally fine with gluten foods. Maybe you just need to be eating more fiber and that's why you're bloated all the time. Maybe you're not having regular bowel movements. Maybe you're eating too much fiber and that's what's destroying your gut. So it's important for us to be able to look at your individual needs and really get to the root of why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. Okay. With that said, if you start to eliminate foods that contain gluten, and you feel better, then we're on to something. But I would say that you might be excluding something that is not necessarily necessary to be excluding. And you could probably feel as great as you're feeling or even better if you learned how to incorporate it in moderate amounts, or if you learned how to just eat better in general. Maybe that's why you're not feeling well. So all that to say, it's important to get to the root. So if you're interested in figuring out, what's going on, what foods fit best for you, what don't, all those things, and you want to understand, then I recommend going to www.tipswithtony.com/coaching. We're currently accepting applications and we're interested in helping you get to the root of why you're feeling how you're feeling, and helping you understand what foods make you feel your best. So go to www.tipswithtony.com/coaching, fill out that application. And a quick update, because I don't know, you guys are going to be, this episode's coming out at the end of August. I am really, really close to releasing my book, like so close. So be on the lookout. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at tips_with_Tony with an I, because that's when I'm going to announce it. And be on the lookout for some things, some giveaways, some extra handouts and support as I prepare to launch this thing. So it's coming out really close. I don't have an exact date yet, but I'm aiming for end of September, early October, absolute latest. That is the ultimate goal, and I'm going to make it happen. So be on the lookout for my book. It's called Once Upon a Diet. And if you're interested in figuring out what it's about, you can always check out my TED Talk, which I will link in the show notes as well. All right. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.